Rivalries aren't simple. You can't create a makeshift trophy one day, call your opponent a rival, and expect it to stick the next day. No. Rivalries become rivalries when the stakes get raised over the course of time. For most schools, the prize is bragging rights that get renewed or returned a year later. But the landscape of college football is changing. We're starting to see a rise in the non-conference rivalry, specifically amongst major powers. It's no longer just the most impressive teams in the same conference. Times have changed in college football. With a playoff system, teams are willing to take more leaps in scheduling, and that gives us bigger matchups that inorganically create the magic around the rivalries we've come to see over time. One example of a manufactured rivalry is USC-Texas. True, you can make the case that it's not really a rivalry, but when these two programs meet, the stakes are high, and that's what makes a matchup evolve into a rivalry. These teams have only met a handful of times, but between legendary coaches and legendary finishes, this matchup has the intensity of a rivalry. Side note, this series also included the time Pete Carroll called a run up the middle on 4th and 2 to seal the game, and got stopped. Just saying. When these teams met in 1966, USC was trying to sneak into the Rose Bowl. In 1967, both teams were in the AP Top 5 when they met. The Trojans eked out a 17-13 win that fueled the rest of their national title season, while Texas stumbled. It was 39 years before these teams met again. This time, the stakes were high. The Rose Bowl for a national championship. In one of the greatest games ever played, Texas, led by Vince Young, foiled the Pete Carroll, Matt Leinart, and Reggie Bush reign of terror USC held over college football. Fast forward to 2017, and these two programs duked it out again. USC won and were considered playoff hopefuls until the wheels fell off a couple weeks after surviving Texas. And in 2018, Texas had its revenge. These two teams don't meet regularly, but we've grown accustomed to this matchup being one that has high stakes. But this isn't the only non-conference rivalry that brings fans to the stands. If we show you two cards, one with USC and one with Ohio State, what's one of the first things you think about? One of those things is probably the Rose Bowl. For the better part of the 1960s and 70s, USC-OSU made constant trips to the granddaddy of them all and had national titles on the line. When both teams met in the 2018 Cotton Bowl, some jokingly called it the Rose Bowl at the Cotton Bowl. On top of raising the stakes, a rivalry, for it to go mainstream, has to include programs with sustained success. Ohio State-Michigan is one of the biggest rivalries in sports because it really took hold after the 10-year war between Woody Hayes' Buckeyes and Bo Schembechler's Wolverines. The intensity, the stakes, and bragging rights sent the rivalry into a whole new level that still holds to this day. The Red River rivalry between Texas-Oklahoma is generally a litmus test for who amongst the two is on their way to claiming conference supremacy or who still has hopes for a national title. Same goes for Florida State-Miami and Auburn-Alabama. While geography played a role in those major rivalries taking shape, the times are starting to change a little bit. Not only do teams have to beat their conference and by association their geographical rivals, but the increased pressure in getting a spot at the playoff table includes branching out and playing tougher opponents out of conference. We've entered a new stage where the Alabamas of the world are out here playing against Florida State, Virginia Tech, and other Power 5 teams before mid-September. Granted, those were one-off events, but other programs have taken to the home-and-home series, and that could spawn, under the right circumstances, a new non-conference rivalry. For example, in 2020 and 2021, Ohio State and Oregon will take part in a home-and-home series. While OSU has won all 9 of the meetings, the last 2 have been for a Rose Bowl or national title. Since both teams have conference ties to the Rose Bowl, it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility that these two would meet outside of a regular season matchup. If Oregon could win one or both regular season matchups and face Ohio State in a Rose Bowl, or any other major bowl for that matter, then it's safe to say that a non-conference rival has been born through the college football playoff rat race. Same could be said for teams with conferences tied to the Sugar Bowl. Both Oklahoma and Texas have LSU penciled in on the schedule in the near and distant future. If the series goes back and forth, and a little postseason mingling happens, we get these high-profile matchups that raise the stakes, get fan bases emotionally invested, and have us clamoring for these matchups at the next opportunity.